Hello, Booktube. From a rainy, rainy day in Boston, I'm making these videos and throwing them down a well because I don't know that the Wi-Fi is going to work to upload them. When it's pouring rain, it typically does not. But I'm going to give it a try anyway. Hope springs eternal. And besides, this video couldn't wait. So, months and months ago, Matthew at Mayberry Book Club, with his wet behind the ears fledgling channel, made a video. Has Steve Donoghue read it? He was looking at the books on the shelves in his tiny house, and he thought, has Steve Donoghue read all of these books? Because I'm forever banging on this channel about books. And before that, I was banging on about books in reviews and also at the information desk of a busy bookstore. I've read a lot. And he was wondering, does that encompass all the books that I'm looking at? Wouldn't that be a weird feeling? So he made a video listing a few books and asking if I had read them, and it caught on. A whole bunch of people wanted to get into the game and play that same thing, see if I had read all the books they nominate. It was a lot of fun to watch that happen. I started making response videos to everybody. And a vague idea of rules started to appear. Of course, this is a friendly thing, so there aren't any hard and fast rules. But if we had to name rules, we could do a small number of them that I think would help everybody to channel their creative energy. Number one being 8 books. Let's stick to 8 books. Number 2 being something that I saw on Matthew's channel that I don't think was stressed enough, which is that it shouldn't just be you going to Goodreads. It should be something that you either have or haven't read, rather than just a book you've heard about. Also, we might want to keep it to English or English language translations. And the last one I probably doesn't need a whole lot of stating, which is no a-hole picks. Don't go to your bookshelves or to your Goodreads specifically looking for something that you know perfectly well I haven't read. That you can, not a long shot, but something that you're picking because it is mind-numbingly, pretentiously obscure. so that it would be an unbelievably remarkable thing if I had read it. That kind of choice removes the fun from this fun endeavor. We want to keep this thing fun. And that fad ran its course. There were a dozen videos or more. It was lots and lots of fun for me and for everybody else. I got the impression for everybody else. I heard from a lot of people actually what I heard just recently, which is that it's, if anything, more fun to listen to me talk about the books than it is to see whether or not your end score is high or low. Because I guess a lot of you, it's sort of a roundabout way of wondering what I have to say about the books on your shelves. One way or another, it ran its course, as all booktube fads do, and then died away. And recently, Daniel at Guilty Feet took it up again. I don't know why, but he decided to give Has Steve Read It a season 2, and he kicked it off himself with 8 books. That he wondered whether or not I had read. And of his 8, he scored 2 beans. 2 beans. 2 books that I hadn't read. And that was great fun, and it opened the floodgates. It opened the door for everybody else to get in on season 2. Not just new people who didn't have booktube channels when season 1 happened, but also all the returning stars. Do they have more books they want to try that they didn't try the first time? Now that months and months have passed, I've made literally thousands of videos. You all have a better triangulation of what I may or may not have read. It might be more fun to try it a second time. And Matthew, the originator of these shenanigans, decided to make a part 2. He decided to make an entry in season 2 of the phenomenon that he himself created. So I thought we'd go through his choices and see how they rack up implicitly against Guilty Feet. Because right now, Guilty Feet is the only contestant in the running. Which means that right now, he is both the winner and the loser. That is untenable. That is untenably Heisenbergian. We want winners and losers. So, we're going to embark on Matthew's books this time around. The first one he picks is Hallie by G.V. Dasani. And this is a kind of a weird thing. This is an Indian author. I heard a lot about him when I lived in India. Dasani has never been one of my favorites. I don't think he's all that talented. And this is a sort of a collection of miscellaneous bits and pieces. And in this collection, I can't recommend it. I don't think Matthew recommends it in his video. God knows I am not shy of praising great Indian writers, of which there are a great many. I don't think Dasani is one of them. And in this collection, I have not read the whole thing. There are a couple of bits in it that I have read, and one of the bits in it I actually think is pretty good. But mostly, the tone in the bits of this book that I read and in the other book of him that I read was dull. But since I haven't read the whole thing, I'm going to count this as a no. I haven't read the whole thing. It doesn't matter if I've dipped in. So Matthew's off to an excellent start. He has one bean. We are at no for Hallie. Then we move on to Border Districts by Gerald Murnane. And this would ordinarily have been a no. This is an Australian author who he checks all of the boxes for the dude bros. All of them. His writing is bland. His writing is boring. His writing is extremely derivative. His writing is unbelievably sexist. His writing is openly misogynist. He himself makes a fetishistic Hemingway-esque game out of being a writer. It's a burden rather than a pleasure. It's full of idiosyncrasies. I think he might write in rock rather than on the otherwise requisite yellow legal pad. And then, I write out these little bits and pieces. So I fished for trout in the morning. Cut its head off, fed bits to the dog. Dog got sick, had to kill the dog. Did it with my own hands. Then in the afternoon, I wrote a little bit. I'm a man, so I don't care about it. But I wrote a little bit. I'll know if it's any good. I'll let it sit for 2 years. That's what you got to do. You write it on a red checker tablecloth, and you got lots of more important things to do. There's a wife in the back room needs beaten, or she'll get all uppity. It's not like I care about this stuff. It's not like I'm a homo or anything. I'll write a few pages and then I'll let it sit for a couple of years. And no, I don't leave my hometown. And no, I hardly leave my house. And no, I don't really care about this at all. And no, I'm much more interested in killing rats with rocks or whatever. All the usual dude bro crapola that has made him a bit of a dude bro icon. And recently, just a few years ago, right before I think we started talking to each other, a publisher in the United States thought, well, let's get us some of that. There's no end to the money that dude bro readers will pay if a book tickles their sweet spot, which is way away from the sweet spot of where they do their actual reading. This is for dude bro readers who want to be told over and over again that art is not a product of working. It's not a product of craft. It's not for women. And it's not all that important. I'm going to feel a little gay if I talk about it too much. Instead, it's got to be something that I sort of carve out with a nut bolt etcher on a red checker tablecloth as the least important thing I do that day. An American publisher saw that and thought, hoo-hoo, let's get us some of that. So they reprinted Murnane. A big fat volume of short stories and I think a dumb novel. And I saw it, and it was, to me, another example of the Green effect, of the Henry Green effect, where periodically an American publisher will try to make an author happen with the dude bro crowd. They'll just try to do it, even though the author had a shot, and maybe had a second shot, and it didn't work. They'll still keep trying. And I saw it, and I thought, I remember looking at those books, I think at the Christian Science Monitors, and I remember looking at them thinking, well, okay, these are full-scale editions. The American editions are hideous, just like all American editions are. I thought, okay, this is a full-scale attempt, not just to garner dude bro readers, but to game the American reviewing system. Because you are pitching you're going to send copies of these two books to every single book section anywhere in the country, and your publicity sheet is going to say this is an overlooked master of English language that is not known in America, even though he is venerated, in the outback. And I thought, I was looking at those sheets, I was looking at those books, and I was thinking, God, I wonder if this works. I wonder if this works. Something as crass and openly manipulative as this, I wonder if this will work. And it did. It did. Murnane got extensive write-ups in all of the usual suspects, including, very disappointingly, in the Wall Street Journal's book section. Even though he is self-evidently no good. He is as much junk as every other dude bro writer. He doesn't deserve the write-up. It was Henry Green all over again. And as is usually the case with such artificial attempts to create genuine enthusiasm, it went nowhere. It fizzled. No one. There were write-ups in book review journals, but no one's out there saying, no American is out there saying, oh yes, burning. No, that's not happening. But it's still yes, because I was and am part of that publishing, reviewing / what Gore Vidal called the book chat world. I am a part of that world. Couldn't have a big effort like this go to nothing, so I did read those 2 productions and hated them. Just hated them. It's just utterly worthless. You wouldn't think anything of it at all if you weren't also just as heavily or more so publicizing all the dude bro details about the author. He writes with the fang of a saber-toothed tiger that he killed in the outback with his bare hands. He dips it in ink that he made from the blood of his first ex-wife, and that's how he writes, on his yellow legal pads, on his red checkered tablecloth. So, you don't have to like reading or anything. You're still gonna love this guy, aren't you? Anyway, we can't have these Has Steve Reddits degenerating into strings of rants now, can we? So the answer to this one is a yes, so we'll move on to the next one. And the next one, we have mentioned that with Has Steve Reddit, there will be interesting choices. There'll be borderline choices where the chances are very good. And there'll also be what we refer to as facepalm choices, where I simply cannot believe that the person who made the lineup of books thought for a minute that I hadn't read the book. And this next one definitely falls under that heading. I'm not sure if it's the only one on this list, but it's the foremost one. And it's When a Rogue Meets His Match by Elizabeth Hoyt. It's a Regency romance novel. It's behind me on this bookcase, buried there. I think it's double stacked back there. Elizabeth Hoyt is, of course, wonderful. She is wonderful. Matthew, in his video, pulls out all of the compensatory details. I thought maybe I was missing something. I went to the grocery store, where the little old ladies go, that little demi-monde aisle where they have little mass market paperbacks, and I got one of them. It wasn't really to my liking. Good dialogue, but needless to say, I disagree. Elizabeth Hoyt is a terrific modern Regency romance author, and of course I have read this book. I've read every book in the series. I've read every book I think that this author has written, unless Sarah at the Bookish Knitter is going to tell me that Elizabeth Hoyt, like so many romance writers, had a long career at first in the Harlequin category romances, in which case I might not have ever seen those. But all of her big production numbers, these big colorful things, I have read all of those. So that's a yes. The next one is an interesting one. It's translated literature, so I could see where Matthew might think that his chances would be good. It's by Dasha Drinich, and it's called Belladonna, and it's a yes. It's a terrific book, just terrific. Everything that I've ever read by this author has, or heard from this author, like in interviews, has been wonderful. Just so smart and so eloquent. Really, the word eloquent just comes to mind, and understated. I love Belladonna. I wish that I had a copy of it. I think it came out in America in an English language translation in both hardcover and then later in a trade paperback. I'd love to find a copy of either one of them, but I don't have either one at the moment. But the book is a definite yes and a recommend. And the next one might also be a facepalm. It's a recognized work of canonical modern European literature, so I find it hard to believe that Matthew would think that I hadn't read it or everything else by this author. It's not quite the facepalm that are modern Regency romances. I mean, aside from the romance channels on BookTube, who talks about Regency romances more than I do. But anyway, it's The Dwarf by Per Lagerquist. I'm not good with names under the best of circumstances. Per Lagerquist. It's even in English language translation. It's a very good book. Dark and brooding. Matthew's right about that, but I think I enjoyed it probably more than he did, maybe for its historical setting. But one way or another, it's a yes. A little bit of a confusing yes and a yes. Then the next one is Rasputin the Holy Devil by Renee Fulop Miller. And this is a no. It appears to be an older book, an older biography of Rasputin, the mad monk who wormed his way into the royal court, the royal czarist court at the end of the final days of the Romanovs. I find Rasputin interesting, but not fascinating the way so many of his devotees do. Not at all. I think it's mostly not his story is mostly not a reflection of his alleged supernatural charm or psyche, but rather the uh, rather marked, somewhat syphilitic, and definitely inbred stupidity of the people he was bamboozling. I think his story much more highlights the stupidity. In that story, the handful of people in the Romanov court who weren't stupid stand out like a sore thumb because they can see through this guy like cheesecloth, and they do. They don't benefit from it because he had hoodwinked people who matter. But I know a lot of people who are so fascinated by Rasputin that they have read every biography of him, and I just don't see the appeal of that. So I haven't read this one. I've read probably 4 biographies of Rasputin. One, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Olive would probably know. There's one that I think in English really stands out from the others, and if I remember, I'll try to link it down below. Most of them are just lurid gossip that spends a lot of time on the multiple attempts to kill Rasputin and the rumor that went around that he was unkillable, and that even after those attempts succeeded, he still somehow survived. We have all sorts of very good forensic evidence. He did not survive, Hellboy notwithstanding. But nevertheless, I'm not fascinated with him enough to dig out and read. Like, for instance, if I went to the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, which I am occasionally prone to do, if I came across a biography of Rasputin there that I hadn't read, I think I would just leave it. I don't think I'm interested enough in this figure to read it again. So that's a no. And now we'll move on. The next one is The Grapes of Ralph. Ralph Steadman's art, a big art collection book of Ralph Steadman narrative art, cartoonish, the kind of washy pastels that he has. A big thing that I have in fact read. It had its big heyday. When did that book come out? 30 years ago? I don't remember the exact date, but it came out when I was working in a bookstore. And like a lot of you will know, if you've worked in retail bookstores, they let you borrow stuff. The staff can you take the dust jacket off, you log the dust jacket, so that people know what's out and who has it and for how long, and then you take the naked book. The idea being you can become knowledgeable with the stock that way without it costing you anything, and the assumption being that if you bring back that naked hardcover and it's in terrible shape, everybody knows who you are, they know where it happened, and you just have to buy it. And I took liberal advantage of that at my bookstore. Liberal. The staff, depending on whether or not you had a vicious manager, in retail, some of you will know this, retail sometimes draws vicious people into management capacities. Just unregulated a-holes, people who just love attacking and making other people miserable. So they're not provoked. It's not the job that provokes them. They just are that way. And when I had one of those managers, or when one of them was roaming around the sales floor, then they would sometimes make it difficult. I would be getting to the end of a work shift, and I would say to whoever was manager on duty, I would say, just to lodge it in the back of your head, my shift is over soon, and I would like to borrow a book. You need somebody to sign it out. That person has to be in the cash room or the stock room or whatever, and they have to be a manager. And if it was one of those vicious managers, then every obstacle in the world, I don't have time right now. Look, I'm sorry, I don't have time right now. To the point where there were a couple of times where I made that notice, and the a-hole manager in question, of course, didn't respond. A-hole managers ignore comments from sub-management. Just ignore them. They don't. It's not like they give a brief response. They just pretend that you didn't talk to them. And then the time would come when my shift was over and it was time for me to check out a book and go. And I would say, you remember a little while ago, I said, my shift is over. I'm wondering if you could come back to the room and check out a book for me. It'd take you 5 seconds. And a couple of times I had one of those a-hole sub-managers say, I'm sorry, I'm too busy at the time. And a couple of times I actually had to say, okay, to my eyes, it looks like you are idle at this moment. Care to tell me what you're doing? You could see the hatred in their eyes. Oh my God, in that moment they wanted so bad to fire me. They knew they couldn't do it, but they wanted so bad to do it. But most of the time it was people who were just interested in what I was taking out and who were always ready to find out what I thought of it the next day. So I took liberal advantage of that. I don't think I would ever have bought The Grapes of Ralph on my own. In fact, I know I wouldn't. If I saw it at a used bookstore, at the Brattle, for instance, I don't think I would buy this volume. But I did go all the way through it lovingly so that I would know what it was and so I'd know how to talk about it with customers. So that is a yes. And Matthew didn't stray far from illustrated works for his next thing. And this is a graphic novel adaptation by Stephen Hewitt of Swan's Way by Proust. And it's a yes. I did the same thing. I borrowed it from a bookstore. Because I have been on a lifelong quest to find a way in to Remembrance of Things Past. I've tried 2 different translations ongoing. I've gone back to them many times. I just cannot get Proust. I know that the fault must be partially mine because I know lots of readers who love him. And they can't all be wrong. 40 million Frenchmen can't be wrong. They can't all be wrong. I'm willing to admit that it might be me in a case like this. I try everything, though. Not audiobooks. I haven't tried audiobooks, but I've tried everything else. Little bits and pieces, excerpts, new translations. And this is a graphic novel adaptation. I absolutely tried it, and it failed completely. I was not able to understand why this is anything other than boring, which has been my problem with Proust all along. I read 20 pages, 200 pages, 2,000 pages, 2 million pages, and I say, how is this anything but boring? But anyway, that's a yes. And for those of you keeping score at home, you will realize, you'll be wondering, okay, now we have 2 contestants, so someone can be a winner and a loser. But alas, no. Alas, no. Because I am not allowing myself a yes for Hallie, I have not read the whole thing. Matthew got 2 beans. And again, if I had the technical ability, I would add 2 little schnauzer heads right there. Matthew gets 2 beans, which is the same score that Guilty Feet had. So we have 2 contestants, but no winners and no losers. They are equally pathetic. they equally scored 2 out of 8. So the door is still open. One of you could step forward, make a video, pull down 8 books, give them a fighting chance, and maybe pull ahead. Keep in mind, if I remember correctly, for season 1 of Has Steve Read It, we had the same kind of miserable, pathetic dwelling at the bottom rankings for a while until the numbers started going up. So it could happen again in season 2. But it's not going to happen with the originator of this whole myth. Matthew at Mayberry Book Club scores a 2 beans. And that is the latest episode of Has Steve Read It, season 2. What will tomorrow bring? That largely depends on you. I will convene for now. I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.